remove a few things to work on this side of the engine. We have the compressor coolant pipe that comes off the top there that goes up to that guy. That's out of the way. We already drained the cooling system because we changed the block heater and the compressor coolant hoses. So, and then we also removed this exhaust pipe, down pipe from the manifold to the turbo. That gives us a little more room here. Probably be nice to get that exhaust pipe off, but it'll be all right. And then this guy makes it kind of tight in there. It's kind of hard to get two arms in there, which you need when you're doing the valve adjustment. So, we're getting it. We got to finish doing. We got all the jakes installed on this side. We just got to finish doing the valve adjustment and the injector height adjustment. So that's basically the tune-up for this engine. And we'll just double check that the rack looks pretty good. We'll see if we have to mess with that. I don't really want to mess with it. If it looks like it's in pretty close adjustment, we'll just leave it be. The engine runs pretty good, so I don't like messing with things if it's running pretty good. So we're working on putting jakes on this bus, and one of the things we got to replace this air cylinder. That's the fast idle. So we're going to put a buffer switch fast idle in here. And I noticed that this little hose, you can see it's melted and it's flat. I think it's already, I don't know, there's something else here, but I think that's a cable. The shutdown cable is also in pretty bad shape. It's getting a lot of heat for some reason up under here. So I don't know. I think on ours they run them down lower, down in the valley down there, to keep it away from that heat. So we're going to try to pull that off and see if we can reroute that. So I'm doing my best to video this and hold the thingy here. So you can see right here where I've got that Allen key, I'm taking out a plug. So this is for where the Jake's wire will go into the head. Hitting the, I think I can get it long ways on there. Sorry, it's blocking out my hand. Maybe let's get it back down far enough. Like my fingers on it. There it goes. There you go. So that little guy is the plug. And then now you can see there's a hole right there. That's where the wire will pass through into the head. Alright, we're going to loosen all these lines up. With Jake brakes, you get all new fuel lines. So you gotta adjust the new valve bridges. I checked the old ones with this same procedure we're gonna do right now. So you gotta put two shims. I think they're 0.001 shim material. You gotta put one piece on each side, and then you hold down the valve bridge on the top. While you're holding it down, you try to pull on both of those shims. See, like that one, that one's sliding real easy. If I can Zoom that in, maybe. Can't change it where it's aimed at. Come on, turn it. So right now, this shim right here is loose. It's hard to show it. So I need to tighten that or turn that screw down a little more till it touches more. Pull that one's snug now. Pull on the other one, it's snug. And then so I just run the jam nut down. And then we'll take them over to the vise and tighten these down and torque them. So that one's set. I'm just gonna snug it a little bit. Don't tighten those down. We're sitting on top of these valve stems, because if you put too much pressure on this, you could bend the valve stem by putting pressure on the end of the valve stem. So you should take these out, put them in a vise, and tighten them and torque them. So we're gonna go through and there's 3 more of those to be done. Like I said, I checked these ones stay, because you don't have to change these, but I did double check them that all the valve bridges that the adjustments are still good. But I just left these from what was on here, and these are the new ones for the jigs. All right, so I just wanted to show that you got to cut a special piece of material or a feeler gauge for this so that it fits down in this notch right here. Otherwise, you won't get an accurate reading. So it's got to slip into that little notch. If you have a regular wide feeler gauge, it's not going to sit down in there and sit between that and the top of the valve stem. Alright, so you got to kind of finagle these guys out of the way here, because if this guy doesn't come out, well, I mean, you could take it out, but I think all you got to do is take that boost line off of it. So that's the fuel modulator. Get this switch on here. Just got to line back up and get in there. Get in your hole. Let me have one of those bolts, please. There we go. Now we can slide that over. Put this stand back in. Push it back over. Come on. Oh, that's too violent here. Come on. I want that like that. Stick it on there. Come on. Alright, so then you want to line these up with your bolt, so that way everything, when you put the jake on there, everything will fit. I guess you can see me over here. And we'll do this same one here. Just roll these over. This one's a little easier. You can kind of push that over and then just push it down. Push this up. Get it sitting on the... Start it in there. Get it kind of swung into place. There we go. Again, just line everything up with the bolts. So that way it makes it easier when you put the jake on there. Same thing with this one. So get the bolt hole lined up. And then that'll make it easier when you set the jake on top. So this is the jake with the solenoid. Goes in the middle. Bolt. Started, and then we have to get the rubber O-rings before we put these other two together. Alright, so we're gonna put this is the next cylinder. You gotta put these little rubber O-rings between. That's for the oil jumper. This little adjuster comes out and will connects the oil passages. Alright, let's try this again. I guess it helps if we put it in there the right way. And this sits down top of there like so. Make sure that's it's like we're not sitting. There we go. That sits in there. Once I get these snugged up, I have something to run these down real quick with. This one's got to go in here. Come on. So I put a little bit of grease on there to hold that in place. Hurt anything, the oil will wash the grease out. So this guy sits down on there like so. I'll show you, you got to make sure you got the stuff in the back. Make sure you don't knock those rubber O-rings out while you're trying to put this in here. So you've got to kind of leave all this stuff a tad bit loose. So that way you can line this up. And I kind of center it a little bit where these go in there easy. Easy. So you just want to make sure those are lined up. I'll get a close-up of that. Ow. This thing kind of shifted a little bit. I got a little bit out of control there. Sucker. Jeez. Yes. So just snug them down, and then I'll show you. Get a better light on that. So you can see where that little rubber washer is still in there. So you got to run this thing out. I'm just going to run it out right now so that doesn't fall out of there. But I'm going to wait to make these adjustments until I've torqued these down. So you got to do that on both of these. Where are we? There we are. So right here. So again, just run this out. So you make sure you're lined up. Like I said, I'll tighten this down and deal with it once I get it. Snug these back and forth, just creep up on it so it's nice and even. Alright, something to note when you're putting these on here, you got to make sure this little rear fork right here is sitting over the top of that injector rocker arm. So each of those are sitting nicely over the arm. Actually, is that one cocked sideways? See, that's why we need to check, because that one looks like it's sideways, but I have to pull that one back off. That's why I'm checking them. Looks like it's sideways, but I got to figure out why it's on there, but it's not.
It's on there, but it's not on there?
See, oh, I see. There, see how it's sitting behind there? So we got to get it off of that and get it to where it's on that thing. I don't know if I can do that and hold the camera. There's a bit of play in these things, so. Alright, so I was able to straighten that one up. So see it moves down on there. So those sit down on that arm. Alright, so the way the jakes work is this solenoid's energized from your switch up front. It opens a passage inside the jake that takes oil from these bolts. These bolts have holes in them. So the oil feed comes up through them, and it oils that rocker shaft. But it also takes, and that's how they draw oil into the jakes. So that takes oil into the jake. That oil is sent out here through these oil passages to each of these two jakes, and then this one is done internally. What that does is that forces oil to push down on that back fork that I was just showing you on the back side. That forces that down. Well, what that does is when that injector plunger is depressed, or that rocker arm comes up, it pushes that back up, and it creates a hydraulic lock actually inside of the jake, and that oil is forced from that one over to this one, and it pushes down on this exhaust valve. So like I said, it creates a hydraulic lock between these two plungers, and then that actually forces down on and opens the exhaust valve, and that's how it coordinates it to make sure it's only doing it when the injector's being fired, or would normally be fired. So you know that it's using that little fork on the back to time it basically, and push it up and force down on the exhaust and open the exhaust valves to decompress the cylinder. So that's basically how these operate, and it'll do all three of these at the same time. So the way these are wired on a 6-cylinder is you can do one bank or the other bank, or one bank or both banks basically. So you pick a number one position is one bank, number two position it operates both sets of banks. So there's a one wire going to each solenoid on each side, and those are separate, and I'll get into the wiring here in a bit. I'm going to show you the adjustment on this. So this guy here, you want to run it up till it's tight up against the side of the other one, and then you're supposed to back it off a third. So I come all the way around like that, and then you can tighten that lock nut up. Or jam nut. And it'll be the same over here. this one. So you're going to run that down until it touches. We'll take and bring it up a third, and then tighten down your jam nut. Of course, it always wants to grab the wrench. So that gives you a little gap there, so that way that little nut's not riding on there. Go ahead. So we're turning the engine over. Oh, hold it. That's it. So we're basically watching these. So you got to watch the injector rocker arms and the exhaust rocker arms. So what we're looking for is we want one set to be depressed. This set here is depressing the exhaust valves, and this one here, let's see it. Sorry. And this one down here is depressing the injector. So that means on this one that the injector is depressed, we can adjust the valves, and on this one that the exhaust are depressed, we can adjust the injector. So we'll do that now. So the way I found, I was having a little trouble with getting these adjusted, and I don't do these enough to feel. So you're supposed to adjust this with a 0.016 adjustment, but what I found is this is a 0.017 actually, which is the no-go technically gauge. But what I do is I tighten this down, and I'll show you what I'm tightening back here on the back side. And I tighten this down until I can barely pull this 0.017 out. So it's kind of like a heavy drag, or tighten down till it's almost, so right there I can't pull it out. So I back it off a touch where I can just pull it out. And then I tighten down the jam nut. All right, so you can see down there that this adjustment is on the shank of the, it's, for lack of a better word, it's like a short push rod. So you can adjust the length of that, and that's how you adjust the valves. So what I'm turning right now is the jam nut. So I'm going to get that in place, and then I'm going to get this back on the shank. So this is a 5/16 wrench. If I can get it on there. I can't see really what I'm doing, so looking somewhat blind here. Make some room so I can get my head in here. Trouble. Oh man. Use a regular wrench on this because of the angle of that. Yeah. Sometimes that wrench doesn't fit. So this is a regular 5/16 wrench. So I'm going to get that on the square part of the shank, and then I can tighten up the lock nut. Because they always want to spin on you. So there, I got it on there. So I'll hold that, snug down the lock nut. Okay, so that's in place, and then we'll check the other side with the 0.015 gauge. All right, so we're going to adjust the injector on this one. So these are done with a little pin gauge, this guy here, and you stick it, there's a hole right in there next to the injector follower. It slips down in that hole, and make sure you get all the oil out of there. Kind of move it up and down and purge all the oil out of there. Make sure you're all the way down. And then when you spin it, it's supposed to wipe over the top of that injector follower right here. So right now we're hitting it. So we got to lower that, which means we got to lengthen the rod on the back side. So I'm going to turn this a couple turns. I think I'm going the wrong way. There we go. I'm getting closer. So there, you can see it just wiping across the top of there now. So now what I like to do is actually back it up to where it bumps it just a little bit. Just a teeny bit. Because what happens when you tighten that down, it'll lower that down and be just right. So I like that right there. It just kind of bumps across the top of it just a little bit. And then we'll snug that lock nut down and get the wrench on there. I just don't want to get on there for some reason. So snug that lock nut down. Wrench gets stuck in there sometimes because back edge there, and then we'll run over it and we're just right there, just wiping the oil off the top. It's hard to see. Let me get that light up further. Maybe nope, it's still right there. So yeah, that thing just wipes the oil right off the top of there. And that's where we want to be. So that one's set. All right, so I already got this started. There's a hole right here in the side of the head, and there's a plug in there. So you take that plug out and then you run your wire through there, and then if you don't get these little guys, you're gonna have them made or something, but there's a little plastic nut that the wire goes through, and that seals the side of the head. So that screws into the side of the head here. Maybe. Of course, I'm trying to do it on camera. It won't go in there. Can't see now either. There it goes. And you could take and snug this up. And over here, you got to put this the wire through this little rubber grommet, or this little rubber wire support. So it comes up here, and then this goes between the two. Oh, my light's going out. Goes between the two fuel jumpers here. Alright, so I think we got everything here done, so we're going to remove my little foot rags in here because there's drain holes down here for the oil, so keep anything from going down into the pan if we happen to drop something. So get the cover on this, and the next thing will be get everything filled up with coolant, etc., so we can test it and run it. Everything should be all set now under here.